if you wish, assented Guido. The two started out. After they had gone 3 miles, Guido told him to return. Just another 5 miles, he begged Guido. They continue on. You may return now, suggested Guido. Another 10 miles, the man replied. Return now, said Guido when the 10 miles had been passed. I'm going to follow you all the rest of my life, declared the man. Modern Zen teachers in Japan spring from the lineage of a famous master who was the successor of Guido. His name was Munan, the man who never turned back. The Zen master Hakuin was praised by his neighbors as one living a pure life. A beautiful Japanese girl whose parents owned a food store lived near him. Suddenly, without any warning, her parents discovered she was with child. This made her parents angry. She would not confess who the man was, but after much harassment, at last named Hakuin. In great anger, the parents went to the master. Is that so? Was all he would say.
In need of treatment. Oh, when shall I see Athens and its Acropolis again? Miserable man, art thou not what I never knew before? The meaning of the common saying, a fool you can neither bend nor break. Pray heaven. I think I know it.
And I hope I can read. In 60 like this, learn us when we are submission. No, you just.
Are not sweet, sweet words are not sincere. Good men are not argumentative. The argumentative are not good. The wise are not erudite. The erudite are not wise. The sage does not take to hoarding. The more he lives for others, the fuller is his life. The more he gives, the more he abounds. The way of heaven is to benefit, not to harm. The way of the sage is to do his duty, not to strive with anyone. Sage does his work without setting any store by it, accomplishes. Sage does his work without setting any store by it, accomplishes his task without dwelling upon it. He does not want his merits to be seen. Nothing like it. Nothing can take its place. That the weak overcomes the strong and the soft overcomes the hard. This is something done by old raised. If the bowstring is too long, it is cut short. If it is too short, it is added to. The way of heaven diminishes the more than enough to supply the less than enough. The way of man is different. It takes from the less than enough to swell the more than enough. Who except a man of the Tao can put his superabundant riches to the service of the world? Therefore, the sage does his work without setting any store by it, accomplishes his task without. Nothing in the world is softer and weaker than water, but for attacking the hard and strong there is nothing like it. Nothing can take its place. That the weak of he who is brave and daring will be killed. He who is brave and not daring will survive. Of these two kinds of bravery, one is beneficial while the other proves harmful. Some things are detested by heaven, but get responses without speaking, to induce the people to come without summoning, to act according to plans without haste. Vast is heaven's net, sparse meshed it is, and yet nothing can slip through it. He who is...
You like those, Kyler? Those are on my YouTube channel. These are like 60-second wisdom clips. Hey, Dr. Nick.
For fucking work sites, building 10 fucking multi-million-dollar fucking homes. And you're gonna tell me these people don't belong here? That we're just gonna deport them? No, Cindy, no, nobody's talking about deporting anybody, Cindy. Trump is a megalomaniac. He's a crazy person. And you're fucking right, he's crazy, but nobody's crazier than Cindy fucking Stumpa. Gary Cardone, my brother, is a Bitcoin master. And we've got a lot of incredible videos and business books we want to send you, and then we want you to download it, click it, chat it. Blah, 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 blah. Thank you. Thank you. This is Cindy Stumpo again. Advantage instructor, blah, 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 you can possibly get it. Advantage instructor, blah, 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 you can possibly get it. No money down, guys. Hit me up. I'm a national broker. My national NMLS number is 356420966LLZ. This is down to the bank. Boom! Take it away, Grant Cardone.
How about the Monica impression?
He's guilty of capital punishment. That eventually they're gonna knock on your door. And if you let all the good people die before you die, well then eventually they're gonna come to your house and kill you too. So just listen, let's work together on solving these problems before everybody dies. And then you could listen to me, never go to the gym, never read a book. I'm just a blob with a good heart. But that's all that America's all about, having a good heart. Uncle Sam's got a good heart.
Oh, JB's here. Hi, JB. We're doing impersonations. I just did Cindy Stumpo, Nelson Pega, Jonathan Bingham, Grant Cardone. God bless America. And I could do JB if you want to hear my JB impersonation. Up! You don't even have to mute up! What don't you understand about not having the mute up? You don't gotta mute up. All right. Let's get back on track. Dr. Australia's a troll and goo. So happy Memorial Day. God bless you now. Toxic clown house spam is what generally happens here. I was talking to you
And fucking houses. Right now. Life isn't easy in these trades. The permits, the licensure, I don't even have this real estate portfolio right now. And my grandfather fought in World War II. He fought the Germans. He killed the Nazis. He won liberation for our people.
Probably true, but I was playing a General Patton speech today, and he was talking about how he obliterated Germany and Austria, 1,000 Americans. A lot of people died. But anyways, you know, all communication is 5 things. This is my opinion. Projection, hypnosis, spam, politics, and you know what the 5th one is? All communication.
Yeah.
All communication is, I gave you 4. What was the 5th one I came up with today? But it's just a question of how you spend your time. Because your time is really dictated by what you are.
One impression?
All right. No mentioning of former speakers. Direct your questions and comments at me. No former speakers. My name is Dr. Steve Appel, and I have been an online troll for approximately 25 years. I converted to atheism when I was only 18 years old, and I realized that the man in the sky is just a figment of our imaginations. But if you're looking for top-notch legal representation in terms of Social Security, disability, and workers' compensation, for over 25 years, Dr. Steve Appel, an online social media content creator, not an actual attorney, barely a paralegal, would like to work with you to help you get all of your workers' rights and compensation. Become a parasite of the California socialist system, sucking America dry. This is your local atheist and friend, Dr. Steve Appel. Call me Uncle Steve, everybody. Hi, kiddos. This is your Uncle Steve. Hold on, let me take a drag of this cigarette and have some more whiskey as I debate whether or not I should blow my fucking brains off live on the air as an atheist. No.
I mean, you know, kind of a joke. I went dark at the end though with the, that joke. But But the point is, there is no point. So if you're going to come here and do the same show every time, I mean, I say consistency is a good thing because it's, constant. I think people like repetition and
Yeah, I
constancy.
mean, he's the one that always does the like Ask the Atheist rooms, right?
Yeah, he's blocked all of my accounts, so I haven't seen him in many months now, which I feel like has been a good thing for me. And see, that's the thing about being your true, authentic self is if you get blocked, it's what you actually desire because I want to remove these people from my communication stream. And by maybe harassing them or trolling them or letting them know I'm recording what they're saying, like that basically frees up more of my time for me.
Wait, are you blocked out of Chillism?
No, but
Because you keep.
they kick me regularly.
What about Debate the News? Well, Debate the News doesn't. All it is Debate the News now is Jonathan Bing. He's putting up Chatter live thing, and he's just doing the replays on Clubhouse. I think that's what he does now. I don't know.
What a life. Am I one of these retards too? See, it's easy to forget that I'm like a bald, middle-aged man now. Like to think I'm still like some kind of like football star that I never really was. But the point is, football stars and boxers, I think they have traumatic brain injury, and I'm actually, I've been banged in the head many times, and I don't think I have TBI, but.
Have you seen the movie Concussion?
No.
It's a really good movie, but it talks all about that, like all the football players. Like, I'm sure you've seen that documentary on like, it's called like Broke, about all these athletes that went broke, and like the majority of them are like football players.
Yeah.
Dude, and the stupid shit that those guys. One of the guys was giving one of his friends, or I think it was his brother, an allowance of like $6,000 a month, right? And this is back in like the 90s. And all of a sudden, like, everyone heard his like good contract. He started having all these new friends, and he lost like 4 houses and like 3 cars in a year. Because like they're stupid. They don't understand. Like, buying a $5 million house is one thing, but you gotta maintain that bitch. And that bitch doesn't cost like $200 a month to heat and cool. It costs like $2,000.
Well, I'm just merely comment, like, I think Dr. Pepe on here, I think he has TBI because if you actually listen to what he says and how many times he's said it and what his, like, communication here is, I mean, I think you can judge a person by what they actually say, and do a very quick diagnostic in terms of somebody's intelligence. But then you have to question, why the fuck am I spending time even talking with this person or listening to this person? Now, I record everything I do, but it blows my mind. I just think people actually hear, there's a small percentage of people that are recording. Like, there's people like Dr. Australia down there. That is the BTR of Nora Bandora, and she records. But the thing is, I think people that are recording are actually doing, like, these are all therapeutic things. I mean, creation is the ultimate form of therapy in a way, because you need to be expressive and liberal or free to think and feel and say and do. I mean, unencumbered, because otherwise, how do you out process that underlying thought or tendency which you want to get out to find out whether it's a bad idea?
Well, I think it's hilarious when you go into the Palestinian rooms and troll them. Those are hilarious. When you start fighting with them, those are hilarious.
Yeah, I'm heavily blocked too across all of my accounts. So, I don't know.
So what is that? Who is that one guy, the Israeli guy, that you were in there trolling the room, and we were talking about the Federal Reserve? I can't think of his name.
I don't know which one.
I don't know. It was a couple weeks ago. We were just talking about the Federal Reserve. Abby was in there. The one that lives in like Las Vegas or Pennsylvania or wherever.
Yeah, I've had a lot of good experiences trolling these people. You know.
But yeah, that guy was getting so pissed that he was like, all right, you stop, Edmund, you stop. Because you're trolling the Palestinians the whole time.
Yeah, I can send you know, ripples up their spinal column with my obnoxious troll, and I have conditioned them with my troll in a way. But I'm heavily blocked. Doctor, happy Memorial Day. God bless you now. I was hoping maybe you could say a prayer for the room and sing us a song.
I would say, Dear Lord, on this day of remembrance for the veterans that, Lord, passed away even after the wars, Lord, but they're gone now. We remember them also. And that we think of the sacrifices that they provided for our freedoms based on the times away from their family, Lord. And I hope that in heaven, Lord, that you're able to keep them with you and reunite them with the family of the youthful innocence that I know that we are the children that you want us to be. In your name I pray. Amen.
So Connie in my YouTube live, she writes, it's easier to judge a person by what they do. But don't you think we do what we say?
The veterans that all.
Well, it depends.
Well, no, it doesn't. If you make your yes or your no your no, you always know exactly where that person comes from.
That the Native Americans have, which says, if you can say it, it is not true, which is the same thing as saying, the more I think, the more I speak, the further from the truth I get. So it's a trick question, basically. But I think that succession should be good thoughts, you know, good actions, good outcomes. So the good thoughts part is what you're saying. And I think you can judge a person by what they say rather rapidly. And that's what we do as, you know, communication humans. We quickly evaluate and do an analysis of value immediately within 3 seconds. I mean, what do you think that whole television show, Name That Tune, is all about? It's this, we're just musical instruments. So some people want to play the same song over and over again, do the same dance over and over again. They don't have 100,000 variables to their tune. They've got only a couple beats. So don't skip a beat. And I
think when you're oversimplifying it a little bit when you're talking about like how human nature, yeah, we do play, you know, name that tune. Oh, I can do it in 5 notes, so I can do it in 4. Like, yeah, but we are like definitely creatures of pattern recognition, especially when it comes to like an auditory stimulus. But we're also visual, and we're also sensual. And we have, you know, biases based on our preferences, and those overcomplicate, you know, the simplicity of just we are musical instruments.
So, you know, the more I observe ants, the more I appreciate intelligent design, knowing that ants are so smart in terms of communication. It's unbelievable when you actually observe ants and how they systematically program and communicate and execute and logistics and all this activity that ants do, and how intelligent it is and how small they are. I just see that as being like the absolute mirror of man. It's like ant and man, man and ant. I mean, we are so similar because it's just pure programming. So, you know, I mean, we are so much more intelligent. Um, it's unbelievable how much more intelligent we are, but I know that most of my life is, you know, like when I look at these books, I know that I didn't write any of this shit, but I can read it and experience it in the now. And an ant is literally just almost mindlessly drone like going about its activities for energy harvesting. So I don't know.
Yeah, but other than like communicating like, hey, I figured out a new way to bite this like leaf off to make it fall quicker. Like, what are they innovating? Like, are they building a race car? Like, the simplicity of their brain.
They're energy harvesting. They're looking for food. That's what they're doing. They're looking for energy.
Yeah, and they're also smelling chemical trails and following one another, and they're communicating like, hey, I saw that there was this piece of yeah, they communicate very well, but it's on a basic level with no real innovation other than survival. Like, you're stuck in Maslow's like humans' needs, their hierarchies of needs. Air, water, food. A couple minutes without air, a couple days without water, a couple weeks without food. Then you need safety and security. And people are shooting shit again today. I guess I need to. But like after we get that safety and security, then you have to build you a house, because it does you no good to get a house and put it on the side of a volcano. Like you gotta find safety and security, and then build a house. Now you've got a nest. Now you've got where you can actualize as a colony to be able to go out and whether you're hunter-gatherers or whatever you are as a creature. Obviously humans, we figured out how to do agriculture. Ants don't know how to,
Put back in the sun. Once it's this liquid, you're ready to serve.
Maybe I'm on this.
Grab the cup and put a little bit of
That's kind of what I'm getting from the gist of the conversation.
Un poquito chilito con limón. And you serve. Qué rico huele. I'll grab a little more chili and limon.
It's been a tough day, man. Years that.
Well, America was founded on tax revolt.
On what?
On tax revolt. Boston Tea Party.
Oh, on tax rebellion?
Yeah.
The quarter stick of dynamite blow up in the air. These people are fucking stupid. I love them.
Wow. Wait, how many acres do you have?
I have on my property is right at 3/4 of an acre with my house and everything, and then behind it is 52 acres.
Like you have your own.
Of cotton field, and right now the cotton field just got picked up because that's a winter crop, and it got mowed down, refertilized. It'll wait another 2 weeks, and then it'll turn into corn.
The meaning of the common saying.
Like you have yeah.
But I have 2 bays. Like I run my electric bike company out of the other bay.
Okay. Did you finally sell that Porsche? Do you still have it?
No, it's way gone. All the skylines are gone. The SRTs are gone. I'm trying to get rid of this last Lexus, and then I'll be down to one truck and one van. Because at one point I had 10 vehicles, and it was just stupid. I can't use it all. It's dumb. One truck, one van, and one boat.
I'm still trying to convince my friend, like you said, to buy like an older Blazer or something like. Because he just needs a reliable beater car with the 4.3. Because if all that is a 350 V8 chopped down, I know it's a solid engine.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you get them the S10s and the GMC Sonomas and like the Chevy minivans, the Astrovans. Lots of them. Yeah, that motor was they put that in like a couple of the G bodies, I think. Like the end of the G bodies, they put the 4.3 in there instead of the was it the 3? Was it 3.8 that was in the Grand National or the 4.3? I think it was the 4.3. Might have been the 3.8.
Those Grand Nationals, man, they sell for so much.
Oh wait, you can't touch one in rough shape under $100,000.
Yeah. it's so hard to find them. Like,
No, I mean, I can make one. Yeah, you can't find an original.
correct.
Definitely not going to be an original. But I mean, if your buddy's gonna get something, like honestly, the most prolific motor that's most reliable from the Chevy branch of like cheap parts to repair it, get the 5.3 liter V8. That was it might cost you like $60. Like it's not buying like a Bugatti or an Audi, water pump for like $400.
Doc, do you remember there was a 3.4 liter dual overhead cam? That was like GM's voice for. Had the 3.8, like the Regency 88 or Delta 88 or whatever it was.
Yeah, you had and the Buick Optima with the supercharger on it.
Yep.
Like yeah, they had a lot of that. I mean, I'm a big Chevy fan, so like you're literally in my wheelhouse of. You're literally making me happy and not think about Memorial Day right now.
Okay.
My first car was an 81 RX-7, so I grew up with Michael technology in my head.
WS6, and we tried to do like a tune-up. Again, we didn't have the right tools, but to get to those spark plugs, oh my god, that was awful.
Yeah. I do like the body.
But like, I guess actually that motor was a pretty solid motor.
Yeah, but it had a 6-liter LS motor. It's the same motor that's in my van. Same motor in the truck I just sold.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no. But no, what I did is with that 302, when I got back from Iraq, I knew I didn't want to be in the military anymore. So I went to a junkyard and where they stationed me, and he had a shop where he repaired like damaged boats and shit. He repaired fiberglass, and he gave me a bay in his shop, and I went and bought a book by SA Designs called Rebuilding Your Small Block 302, and I went to a junkyard. And I asked the guy, and I'm like, hey, you got a 302 that's got like a cracked block? Cool. And I've literally got me and my buddy, we put it in the back of my truck, and I put it on a hinges stand, and I tore it down, and I went through that book on how to tear it down, and I went through on how to rebuild it back up, and I used the same old parts to redo it, but I cleaned all the parts. I bet you I tore that motor apart and put it back together again. I reused all the gaskets, reused everything, just clean them up. Because all I wanted to do was a broken motor with a crack in the block. It wasn't a usable motor, and I paid $20 for it. I just used it as a model to tear apart and put it back together in the block, which is just a 302 Windsor but bigger. It's actually the exact same thing. It's a Windsor block.
Okay.
That's why.
is getting started. Subversion or lies through like failing.
And like it's thick, maybe like 3/8 of an inch wide, maybe like 4 inches long. We were like Puerto Rican because my first car was an RX-7. When I'd show up to the parking lot pimping at the Winn-Dixie at like 8 o'clock at night, where everybody's showing off their neon lights on their cars. I had the RX-7.
I thank the ranking member for yielding his time. 13.7 million Americans. 13.7 million Americans are the number of people in this country whose health care are going to be stripped in this bill. Now, Republicans are going to try to tell you every single distraction in the book. Federal matching funds for Medicaid can make up 30 to 40% of some of the state budgets that we have going on back in your home. Republicans have put this bill together, rushed it together in a matter of hours on the back of a napkin, shaking it, walking out of the White House, and brought it right here to this floor. They are defunding Planned Parenthood. They are ending tons of Medicaid coverage for 13.7 million Americans, including Affordable Care Act coverage as well. And if you want to see since the 1930s, this is just a Christmas bill.
I yield your ladyship 30 seconds.
And so I want people to understand, for my Republican colleagues who are sure what is in and not in this bill, in this process that has been this rushed, when you wake up in the morning, you will realize that you voted to defund Planned Parenthood and to take away health care from 13.7. I thank the ranking member for yielding his time. 13.7 million Americans. 13.7 million Americans are the number of people in this country whose health care are going to be stripped in this bill. Now, Republicans are going to try to tell you every single distraction in the book from that essential number. I want people at home to understand that Medicaid back in your home. Republicans have put this bill together, rushed it together in a matter of hours on the back of a napkin, shaking it, walking out of the White House, and brought it right here to this floor. They are defunding Planned Parenthood. They are ending tons of Medicaid coverage for 13.7 million Americans, including Affordable Care Act coverage as well. Process that has been this rushed, when you wake up in the morning, you will realize that you voted to defund Planned Parenthood and to take away health care from 13.7 million Americans. And when this country wakes up in the morning, there will be consequences to pay for this. And I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
I thank the ranking member for yielding his time. 13.7 million Americans. 13.7 million Americans are the number of people in this country that Medicaid and the federal matching funds for Medicaid can make up 30 to 40% of some of the state budget of hours on the back of a napkin, shaking it, walking out of the White House, and brought it right here to this floor. They are defunding Planned Parenthood, this legislation as well. Also, allowing suppressors on guns to be
Your ladyship, 30 seconds.
And so I want people to understand, for my Republican colleagues who are sure what is in and not in this bill, and to take away health care from 13.7 million Americans, and when this country wakes up in the morning, there will be consequences to pay for this, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
I thank the ranking member for yielding his time. 13.7 million Americans. 13.7 million Americans are the number of people in this country whose care are going to be stripped in this bill. Now, Republicans are going to try to tell you every single distraction in the book from that essential member. I want people at home to understand that Medicaid and the federal match funds for Medicaid can make up 30 to 40% of some of the state budgets that we have going on back in your home. Shaking it, walking out of the White House, and brought it right here to this floor. They are defunding Planned Parenthood. They are ending tons of Medicaid coverage for 13.7 million Americans, including Affordable Care Act coverage as well. And if you want to get an abortion and have a silver plan on a healthcare plan that you paid for, you will also be affected by this legislation as well. Also, allowing suppressors on guns to be deregulated to some of the largest amounts that we have seen since the 1930s. This is just a Christmas bill. It's a Christmas tree.
I yield your ladyship, 30 seconds.
And so I want people to understand, for my Republican colleagues who are sure what is in and not in this bill, in this process that has been this rushed, when you wake up in the morning, you will realize that you voted to defund Planned Parenthood and to take away health care from 13.7 million Americans. And when this country wakes up in the morning,
But my question is, if the universe was at some point just random or
Jesus Christ, how long are you guys gonna spam each other? This is getting ridiculous. Years of spamming each other with the stupidest shit, and you're at the center of it, Huey the Goat.
We are really tailored to meet a very specific population, adolescents and young adults.
Musings of a Chinese Mystic, Selections from the Philosophy of Chuang-Tzu by Lionel Giles, translated by Herbert Allen Giles. Introduction, Part 1. Although Chinese history can show no authentic contemporary record prior to the Zhou dynasty, some 1100 years before Christ, there is no doubt that a high pitch of civilization was attained at a much earlier period. Thus, Lao Tzu was in no sense the first humanizing instructor of a semi-barbaric race. On the contrary, his was a reactionary influence, for the cry he raised was directed against the multiplication of laws and restrictions, the growth of luxury, and the other evils which attend rapid material progress. That his lifetime should have coincided with a remarkable extension of the very principles he combated with such energy is one of the ironies of fate. Before he was in his grave, another great man had arisen who laid unexampled stress on the minute regulation of ceremonies and ritual and succeeded in investing the rules of outward conduct with an importance they had never hitherto possessed. If Lao Tzu, then, had revolted against the growing artificiality of life in his day, a return to nature must have seemed doubly imperative to his disciple, Chuang-Tzu, who flourished more than a couple of centuries later, when the bugbear of civilization had steadily advanced. With chagrin, he saw that Lao Tzu's teaching had never obtained any firm hold on the masses, still less on the rulers of China, whereas the star of Confucius was unmistakably in the ascendant. Within his own recollection, the propagation of Confucian ethics had received a powerful impetus from Mencius, the second of China's orthodox sages. Now Chuang-Tzu was imbued to the core with the principles of pure Taoism, as handed down by Lao Tzu. He might more fitly be dubbed the Tao-saturated man than Spinoza, the God-intoxicated. Tao in its various phases pervaded his inmost being and was reflected in all his thought. He was therefore eminently qualified to revive his master's ringing protest against the materialistic tendencies of the time. Chuang-Tzu's worldly position was not high. We learn from Sima Qian that he had a petty official post in a small provincial town, but his literary and philosophical talent must soon have brought him into repute, for we find him in frequent contact with the leading scholars of the age, against whom he is said to have defended his tenets with success. It does not appear, however, that he gained promotion in the public service, which is doubtless to be attributed to his own lack of ambition and shrinking from an active career, as we have his personal account of a deputation which vainly tried to induce him to accept the post of prime minister in the Chu state. Official routine must have proved in the highest degree distasteful to this finely tempered poetic spirit, as it has to many a chafing genius since. Bold in fancy, yet tiring by disposition, prone to melancholy, yet full of eager enthusiasm, a natural skeptic, yet inspired with boundless belief in his doctrine. He was a man full of contradictions, but nonetheless fitted to make a breach in the cast-iron traditions of Confucianism, if not to draw others after him in the same track. Of his mental development there remains no record. His convictions, as they stand revealed in his great philosophical work, are already mature, if somewhat lacking in consistency. He comes before the public as a keen adherent of the school of Lao Tzu, giving eloquent and impassioned utterance to the ideas which had germinated in the brain of his master. Chuang-Tzu indeed supplies the primary deficiency of Lao Tzu. He has the gift of language, which enables him to clothe in rich apparel the great thoughts that had hitherto found their only expression in bare disconnected sayings. These scraps of concise wisdom, which are gathered together in the patchwork treatise known as the Tao Te Ching, seems to have formed the kernel of his doctrine, and he proceeded to develop them in 100 different directions. It would be unjust, however, to infer from this that there is nothing in Chuang-Tzu which cannot be traced back to the older sage, or that he was incapable of original thought of distinct and independent value. On the contrary, His mental grasp of elusive metaphysical problems was hardly, if at all, inferior to that of Lao Tzu himself, and certainly never equaled by any subsequent Chinese thinker. His writings also have that stimulating suggestiveness which stamps the product of all great minds. After reading and rereading Chuang-Tzu, one feels there are latent depths still unplumbed. Moreover, he gives free rein to his own particular fancies and predilections. There are sides of Lao Tzu's teaching at which he hardly glances, or which he passes over entirely, while in other directions he allows his brilliant imagination to carry him far out of sight of his fountainhead. If the analogy be not too heavily pressed, we may say that he was to the founder of Taoism what St. Paul was to the founder of Christianity. As with Lao Tzu, Tao forms the center and pivot of Chuang-Tzu's whole system, and this imparts real unity to his work, which in other respects appears undeniably straggling and ill-compacted. But Tao as conceived by Chuang-Tzu is not quite the same thing as the Tao of which Lao Tzu spoke with such wondering awe. The difference will be better understood after a brief sketch of the gradual development in the meaning of the word. The first meaning of Tao is road or way, and in very early times it was used by a figure of speech for the way or method of doing a thing. Thus it came to denote a rule of right conduct, moral action, or the principle underlying it. There also grew up in common speech a natural antithesis between excellence as opposed to the blind groping after truth here below. Finally, the Dian was dropped, and Tao stood alone for the great uncertain in its transcendental sense, but who also retains the older expression Dian Dao. In one of his sayings, Dian Dao is practically equivalent to the Tao, the first cause, and must therefore be translated not the way, but the Tao of heaven. This brings us to the next stage, of which Chuang-Tzu is a representative. In his writings, Tao never seems to mean way, but he introduces a new element in his Chuang-Tzu's Tao. Though by no means always clear and consistent on the subject, he seems to regard it as the virtue or manifestation found in passionless tranquility, a sacred everlasting calm. Now, Lao Tzu speaks of Tao as having existed before heaven and earth. Heaven, he says, takes its law from Tao, but the law of Tao is its own spontaneity. With him, therefore, Tao is the antecedent of Dian, being what modern philosophers term the unconditioned or the absolute. As to his Dian, the ambiguity which lurks there makes it doubtful whether he had any definite conception of it at all. He simply appears to have accepted the already existing Chinese cosmogony, oblivious or careless of its incompatibility with his own novel conception of Tao. Chuang-Tzu, to some extent, removes his ambiguity by reverting to the older usage. He deposes Tao from its premier position as the absolute and puts Dian in its place. Tao becomes a mystic moral principle, not unlike Lao Tzu's De, or virtue, and the latter term, when used at all, has lost most of its technical significance. Thus, broadly stated,
I look forward to you joining us at our next investor webinar, where you can drill deeper into our 9 to 13% annual interest rate bond offerings and see how our company has become an emerging leader in the oil and gas industry. In 2024, Phoenix Energy rose to become the 11th most prolific oil and gas operator in the Williston Basin, one of America's top producing regions. We are now right beside industry giants like ConocoPhillips and EOG, and plan to continue rising in the rankings. Our daily production rates have risen as high as 18,000 D506E bond offerings are open to accredited investors. Our team will guide you through the details of how to get started. Sign up for the webinar and start your journey with Phoenix Energy today.
I wanna live no minute, but pushing on a dream, keep me alive. Introducing the owl. I'm a queen. What is my pride? It's a call to be every body ever slow down. All time I ain't been never been myself.
Some such explanation will prove helpful to the reader, though he may still be baffled by a passage like the following. A man looks upon God as upon his Father, and loves him in like measure. Shall he then not love that which is greater than God? The truth is that neither consistency of thought nor exact terminology can be looked for in Chinese philosophy as a whole, and least of all, perhaps, in such an abstract system as that of early Taoism. Leaving this somewhat barren discussion as to the relative position of Tao and Tien, we now come to what was undoubtedly Chuang-Tzu's greatest achievement in the region of pure thought. As in so many other cases, the germ is provided by Lao Tzu, who has the saying, "The recognition of beauty as such implies the idea of ugliness, and the recognition of good implies the idea of evil." Following up this hint, Chuang-Tzu is led to insist on the ultimate relativity of all human perceptions. Even space and time are relative, since knowledge is gained by looking at things from only one point of view, and is therefore utterly illusory and untrustworthy. Hence, it appears that the most fundamental distinctions of our thought are unreal and crumble away when exposed to the light of nature. Contraries no longer stand in sharp antagonism, but are in some sense actually identical with each other because there is a real and all-embracing unity behind them. There is nothing which is not objective, nothing which is not subjective, which is as much to say that subjective is also objective, and objective also subjective. When he pauses here to ask whether it be possible to say that subjective and objective really exist at all, he seems to be touching the fringe of skepticism, pure and simple. But the point is not pressed. He's an idealist at heart and will not seriously question inferences from this doctrine of relativity. Virtue implies inferences from this doctrine of relativity. Virtue implies vice, and therefore will indirectly be productive of it. In any case, absolutely passive and quiescent, making no effort in any direction. The ideal, then, is something which is neither good nor bad, pleasure nor pain, wisdom nor folly. It simply consists in following nature, or taking the line of least resistance. The attainment of this state and the spiritual blessings accruing therefrom constitute the main theme of Chuang-Tzu's discourse. This elimination of self is in truth the substitution of the ampler atmosphere of Tao for one's own narrow individuality. But Tao is, so far as may be, to a like unconsciousness. But absolute and unbroken unconsciousness during this life being an impossibility, involve at least a total absence of self-consciousness. In order to explain his thought more clearly, he gives a number of vivid illustrations from life, such as the parable of Prince Hui's cook, who devoted himself to Tao and worked with his mind and not with his eye. The higher regions of abstract contemplation, where it will find its fullest scope. The same idea is carried into the domain of ethics, of human action. Thus, were it feasible, Chuang-Tzu would transport mankind back to the golden age which existed before the distinction between right and wrong arose. When the artificial barrier between contraries was set up, the world had already, in his eyes, a sea of relativity and consequent deviation from the heavenly pattern. Herein lies the explanation of the paradox, on which he was not altogether blind to the untenability of an extreme position, may be gathered from a remark. which he casually lets fall. What it means is that any hard and fast, predetermined line of conduct is to be avoided. Abstinence from action just as much as action itself. The great thing is that nothing be done of set purpose when it seems to violate the natural order of events. On the other hand, if a certain course of action presents itself as the most obvious and natural to adopt, it would not be in accordance with Tao of shrink. There is another noteworthy element in Chuang-Tzu's system which does much to smooth away the difficulty in reconciling theory and practice.
Today for 30 days free, pay $5 a month.
It is really a corollary to the grand principle of getting outside one's personality, a process which extends the mental horizon and creates sympathy with the minds of others. Some such wholesome older sage, but Chuang-Tzu went beyond this negative precept. He saw well enough that unless a man is prepared to run his head against a stone, he keeps up to his own standard. There must be no raging and tearing propaganda, but infinite patience and tact. Gentle moral suasion and personal example are the only methods that Chuang-Tzu will countenance. And even with these, he urges caution. If you are always offending others by your superiority, you will probably come to grief. Above all, he abhors the clumsy stupidity which would go on forcing its stock remedies down the people's throat, irrespective of place or season. Thus, even Confucius is blamed for trying to revive the dead ashes of the past and make the customs of Chao succeed. It's up a monkey in the robes of Chou Kang, and it will not be happy until they are torn to shreds. And the difference between past and present, he adds bitterly, is much the same as the difference between Chou Kang and the monkey. The rebuke conveyed in these remarks is not wholly unmerited. Chuang-Tzu, while hardly yielding to Confucius himself in his ardent admiration of the olden time, never fell into the mistake of craft, which could take account of changed conditions and suit its measures to the age. Plainly, the inactivity he preached, hard though it be to fathom and harder still to compass, was something very different from stagnation. It was a lesson China needed. Well for her in these latter days if she had taken it more to heart. End of section 1, of which we have just had a sample. Most of the writers who mention him speak of his hostile attitude towards the head of the Orthodox school. As a matter of fact, this hostility has been a little exaggerated. For one thing, Chuang-Tzu's attitude has been a little exaggerated. For one thing, Chuang-Tzu's attitude is by no means consistent. The tonality. In only one passage is he treated with disrespect, though in another it is implied that he was a prophet unsuited to his age. In chapter 6, we may even discern a rough attempt at reconciling the two extremes of mystic Taoism and matter-of-fact Confucianism. In chapter 6, we may even discern a rough attempt at reconciling the two extremes of mystic Taoism and matter-of-fact Confucianism, limited outlook, its prejudices, forms, and ceremonies. But he frankly recognizes the superior blessedness of the favored few who can transcend it. In some of the later chapters, the genuineness of which is not always unimpeachable, the master is more severely handled. Chapter 22, by a strange piece of inadvertence, he is actually made to disparage the Confucianists with their scholastic quibbles. But it is in the last of the genuine chapters, entitled Li Tzu, that the acme of inconsistency is reached. Here, Confucius is attacked as a man of outward show will succeed. Yet this tirade is immediately followed by a characteristic harangue in the Taoist vein, delivered by no other than the much more fatal than intentional virtue when the mind looks outwards. For by thus looking outwards, The power of introspection is what he does not practice. Misrepresentation is carried to such lengths that sayings are put into his mouth which are the exact opposite. The sheer audacity of the scheme must have attracted him, and he carried it out with what the Confucianists are justified in regarding as the utmost effrontery. Yet it would be too much to say that this curious form of homage was wholly insincere. There are signs that Chuang-Tzu was impressed, all parts of his countrymen. He could not escape the common influence. The very frequency with which he brings Confucius upon the stage, whether as prophet or target for abuse, tells of a certain involuntary fascination.
ED has affected my confidence. I found him. The app is easy. I know that I'm going to be ready to perform.
It was better for both of us.
Treat ED with doctor-trusted medication.
The state of doubt in which we are left with regard to our author's real estimate leads us to say there is a fount of deep, almost fierce earnestness in the man as well. But he never loses a certain delicacy of touch which lends peculiar aptness to the sobriquet of butterfly bestowed on him in allusion to his famous dream. To these qualities must be added, in order to complete a faint sketch of this unique figure in Chinese literature, a recurrent strain of pervasive melancholy, a mournful brooding over the doubtful doom of humankind. Take, for instance, these few lines picturing the mental faculties in their inevitable decline. Just as the form of Chuang-Tzu's work hovers on the borderland of poetry and prose, so the content is poetic rather than strictly philosophic, by reason of the lightness and grace with which he skims over subjects bristling with difficulty. Lucidity and precision of thought are sometimes flashes of literary inspiration. He is said to have shown in his verbal conflicts with Wei Su, but the specimens of his dialect that have been preserved are perhaps more subtle than convincing. The episode of the minnows under the bridge only proves that in arguing with a sophist, he could himself descend into sophistry, naked and unabashed. A noteworthy feature of Chuang-Tzu's method is the wealth of illustration which he lavishes upon his favorite topics. In 100 various ways, he contrives to point the moral which is never far from his thoughts. Realizing as fully as Herbert Spencer after him the necessity of constant iteration in order to force alien conceptions on unwilling minds, he returns again and again to the cardinal points of his system, and skillfully arrays his arguments in an endless stream of episode and anecdote. These anecdotes are usually thrown into the form of dialogue, not the compact and closely reasoned dialogue of Plato, but detached conversations between real or imaginary persons, sometimes easy in tone, sometimes declamatory, and here and there rising to fine heights of rhetoric. It may be objected to this method that it hinders the proper development of thought by destroying its continuity, and is therefore more suited to a merely popular work than to that of a really original thinker. On the other side, it can only be urged that it lends dramatic coloring and relieves the tedium inseparable from a long philosophical treatise. The objection, on the whole, has much force, and yet it is equally true that the alternative method would have robbed Chuang-Tzu's work of more than half its charm. Its immortality is, after all, due less to the matter of his theme have been a bar to very widespread popularity. Chuang-Tzu has never lost favor with the select band of scholars. From time to time, public service should be singled out for promotion who were able to understand Chuang-Tzu. That he was always considered a hard nut to crack is sufficiently shown by the flood of commentaries and other works devoted to his elucidation. Nevertheless, we are told as usual of a marvelous boy, one of the infant prodigies in whom Chinese annals are so rich, who at 12 years of age understood the meaning of both Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, and the reigning emperor presented each of his ministers with a copy. Until we come to Lin Zicheng at the beginning of the present dynasty, native criticism, he hides himself in the clouds and has no knowledge of men. Another pronounces him reckless, one who submitted to no, neither are they founded on eternal principles. Nevertheless, they wear the semblance of wisdom and have their good points. His own heterodox teaching, and consequently, nothing would satisfy them but that his writings should be burnt and his disciples cut off. As to the rights and wrongs of his system, they were not even worth discussing. From kindred poetic souls, he has obtained more generous recognition by 3 short poems, one of which contains the following stanzas. Peaceful Old Age. Chuang-Tzu said, "Thou gives me this toil in manhood, this repose in old age, this rest in death. Swiftly and soon the golden sun goes down. The blue sky wells afar into the night. Tao is the changeful world's environment. Happy are they that in its laws delight. Tao gives me toil, youth's passion to achieve, and leisure in life's autumn and decay. I follow Tao, world's spirit through me thrill, and as a cloud I drift before the wind, or with the random swallow take my will. As underneath the mulberry tree I dream, the water clock drips on, and dawn appears. A new day shines o'er wrinkles and white hair, the symbols of the fullness of my years. If I depart, I cast no look behind. If still alive, I still am free from care. Since life and death in cycles come and go, of little moment are the days to spare."
That's good. Oh, that's good.
The Brahmanistic influence which these lines betray is faithfully reflected from Chuang-Tzu. There are critics who would trace the same influence further back still, and regard the speculations of Lao Tzu himself as borrowed directly from India. But in the absence of any trustworthy evidence of communication between the 2 countries at that early date, the final verdict on this theory cannot yet be pronounced. With Chuang-Tzu, the case is somewhat different. The intervening period had seen the rise of Gautama and the spreading of a new and powerful religion which embodied in itself all the more essential parts of the Brahmanistic creed. By Chuang-Tzu's time, Buddhism had probably penetrated far and wide throughout Asia. It was not officially introduced into China until much later, but it seems only reasonable to suppose that driblets must have filtered through here and there. Certainly we find in the Chinese philosophers such striking points of similarity to Brahmanism as can hardly be explained as mere coincidences of thought. He believes, for instance, that every human being has a soul which is an emanation from the great impersonal soul of the universe. In contradistinction to the mind, which is only the scene or background of our ever-changing sensations and emotions, and dies with the body, the soul is in its nature immortal, and after passing through a series of different states and conditioned being, finally reunites with the divine essence whence it sprang. How to hasten the attainment of this goal of supreme bliss, that is the question which lies at the root of Chuang-Tzu's philosophy. And his answer points to the abstract contemplation of Tao as the only means of destroying attachment to existence for its own sake, and thus loosening the soul from its bodily fetters. Recognized Buddhist ideal in 1 or 2 notable particulars. To him, the highest form of virtue does not mean the mortification of animal instincts. Rather, would he like these to have free and natural scope. Nor does it consist of living the life of a hermit, for the perfect man can transcend the limits of the human and yet not withdraw from the world. Those, he says, who would benefit mankind from deep forests or lofty mountains are simply unequal to the strain upon their higher natures. Again, his hatred of outward show leads him to condemn anything approaching ritualism or asceticism, which he perceives truly enough to be symptoms of decay in the moral fiber. The only form of fasting he will recommend is the fasting of the heart. But divested thus of every shred of materialistic grossness and converted into a purely spiritual creed, Taoism soon became altogether too shadowy and impalpable to stand alone against its formidable rival. It had to await the infusion of much-needed Buddhist elements before it could reassert itself as a national religion. This decline it was Zhuangzi's fate to hasten, rather than to arrest. His capital error lay in neglecting to develop those grand and simple moral truths with which Lao Tzu had leavened his abstruser speculations. The virtues of humility, gentleness, and forgiveness of injury, which the earlier Taoist gospel held in such high esteem, are by him either passed over in silence or subordinated to the all-engrossing mystic purpose. Thus it was that the glowing promise of a singularly exalted moral code died away in later hands to the dust and ashes of a spurious metaphysic. No doubt, as a thoroughgoing exponent of his own principles, Zhuangzi cared but little for outward and visible results. He was in no sense a propagandist. The kingdom of the mind was his real province. Yet the fact remains that the intellectual elevation and refinement of his system placed it beyond the grasp of all except a few. Unlike Confucius, he made little or no provision for the struggling mass of mankind which could not be expected to rise to the higher planes of abstract thought. This, however, is a criticism which leaves Zhuangzi's literary position unaffected, and it is literature, after all, which claims the immortal part of his name and fame. For he of all the ancients wielded the most perfect mastery over Chinese prose science, to no other touch. Finally, what effect may his writings be expected to produce on the modern Western mind? It is certain that to many, even through the necessarily imperfect medium of a translation, he already makes a powerful appeal. And it may at least be safely predicted that a far greater number of readers will be attracted by his originality and grace than repelled by the rather fantastic vagaries of his mysticism. End of section 2. Section 3 of Musings of a Chinese Mystic, Selections from the Philosophy of Zhuangzi by This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Doctrine of Relativity. In the Northern Ocean, there is a fish called the Leviathan, many thousand li in size. This Leviathan changes into a bird called the Rook, whose back is many thousand li in breadth. With a mighty effort it rises, and its wings obscure the sky like clouds. At the equinox, this bird prepares to start for the Southern Ocean, the Celestial Lake. And in the Record of Marvels, we read that when the Rook flies southwards, the water is smitten for a space of 3,000 li around, while the bird itself mounts upon a typhoon to a height of 90,000 li for a flight of 6 months' duration. Just so are the motes in a sunbeam blown aloft by God. For whether the blue of the sky is its real color or only the result of distance without end, the effect to the bird looking down would be just the same as to the motes. The cicada laughed and said to a young dove, "Now, when I fly with all my might, 'tis as much as I can do to get from tree to tree, and sometimes I do not reach but fall to the ground midway. What then can be the use of going up 90,000 li in order to start for the south?" Those two little creatures, what should they know? Small knowledge is not the compass of great knowledge any more than a short ear has the length of a long ear. How can we tell that this is so? The mushroom of a morning knows not the alternation of day and night, The chrysalis knows not the alternation of spring and autumn. Theirs are short years. But in the state of Chu, there is a tortoise whose spring and autumn are each of 500 years' duration.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you joining us at our next investor webinar, where you can drill deeper into our 9 to 13% annual interest rate bond offerings and see how our company has become an emerging leader in the oil and gas industry. In 2024, Phoenix Energy rose to become the 11th most prolific oil and gas operator in the Williston Basin, one of America's top producing regions. We are now right alongside industry giants like ConocoPhillips and
And in former days, there was a large tree which had a spring and autumn each of 8,000 years' duration. Yet Pengzu is still, alas, an object of envy to all. There is nothing under the canopy of heaven greater than the tip of an autumn spikelet. A vast mountain is a small thing. Neither is there any age greater than that of a child cut off in infancy. Pengzu himself died young. The universe and I came into being together, and I and everything therein are one. It was the time of the autumn floods. Every stream poured into the river, which swelled in its turbid course. The banks receded so far from each other that it was impossible to tell a cow from a horse. Then the spirit of the river laughed for joy that all the beauty of the earth was gathered to himself. Down with the stream he journeyed until he reached the ocean. There, looking eastward and seeing no limit to its waves, his countenance changed, and as he gazed over the expanse, he sighed and said to the spirit of the ocean, "A vulgar proverb says that he who has heard but part of the truth thinks no one equal to himself, and such a one am I. When I formerly heard people detracting from the learning of Confucius or underrating the heroism of Poe, I did not believe. But now that I have looked upon your inexhaustibility, alas, for me, had I not reached your abode, I should have been forever a laughingstock to those of comprehensive enlightenment." To which the spirit of the ocean replied, "You cannot speak of ocean to a well frog, the creature of a narrower sphere. You cannot speak of ice to a summer insect, the creature of a season. You cannot speak of Tao to a pedagogue. His scope is too restricted. But now that you have emerged from your narrow sphere and have seen the great ocean, you know your own insignificance, and I can speak to you of great principles. The 4 seas, are they not to the universe but like puddles in a marsh? The middle kingdom, is it not to the surrounding ocean like a tare seed in a granary? Of all the myriad created things, man is but one, and of all those who inhabit the land, live on the fruit of the earth, and move about in cart and boat, an individual man is but one. Is not he as compared with all creation, but as the tip of a hair upon a horse's skin? Dimensions are limitless, time is endless, conditions are not invariable, terms are not final. Thus, the wise man does not regard the small as too little, nor the great as too much. For he knows that there is no limit to dimension. He looks back into the past and does not grieve over what is far off, nor rejoice over what is near. For he knows that time is without end. He investigates fullness and decay, and does not rejoice if he succeeds, or lament if he fails, for he at death. For he knows that terms are not final. What man knows is not to be compared with what he does not know. The span of his existence is not to be compared with the span of his non-existence. With the small, to strive to exhaust the great necessarily lands him in confusion, and he does not attain his object. How then should one be able to say that the tip of a hair is the non plus ultra of smallness, or that the universe is the non plus ultra of greatness? Those who would have right without its correlative wrong, or good government without its correlative misrule, they do not apprehend the great principles of the universe, nor the conditions to which all creation is subject. One might as well talk of the existence of heaven without that of earth, or of the negative principle without the positive. which is clearly absurd. If you adopt as absolute a standard of evenness, which is so only relatively, your results will not be absolutely even. If you adopt as absolute a criterion of right, which is so only relatively, your results will not be absolutely right. Those who trust to their senses become slaves to objective existences. Those alone who are guided by their intuitions find the true standard. So far, the sense is less reliable than the intuitions, yet fools trust to their senses to know what is good for mankind, with alas but external results. End of section 3. Section 4 of Musings of a Chinese Mystic, Selections from the Philosophy of Chuang-Tzu by Lionel Giles. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Identity of Contraries. Body had parted. Young Zhang Zuyu, who was standing by him, exclaimed, "What are you thinking about that your body should become thus like dry wood, your mind like dead ashes? Surely the man now leaning on the table is not he who was here just now."
Gave all.
My friend,
Lord Noel
replied
Hatteras
Tzu
gave
Chi,
so.
your question is apposite. Today I have buried myself. Do you understand? Perhaps you only know the music of man and not that of earth. Or even if you have heard the music of earth, you have not heard the music of heaven. Pray explain, said Tzu Yu. The breath of the universe, continued Tzu Chi, is called wind. At times it is inactive, but when active, every aperture resounds to the blast. Have you never listened to its growing roar? Caves and dells of hill and forest, hollows and huge trees of many a span in girth. These are like nostrils, like mouths, like ears, like beam sockets, like goblets, like mortars, like ditches, like bogs. And the wind goes rushing through them, sniffing, snoring, singing, soughing, puffing, purling, whistling, whirring. Now shrilly treble, now deeply bass, now soft, now loud. Or tuned for low, silence reigns supreme. Have you never witnessed among the trees such a disturbance as this? Well then, inquired Tzu Yu, since the music of earth consists of nothing more than holes, and the music of man of pipes and flutes, of what consists the music of heaven? The effect of the wind upon these various apertures, replied Tzu Chi, is not uniform. But what is it that gives to each the individuality, to all the potentiality of sound? Joy and anger, sorrow and happiness, caution and remorse come upon us by turns, with ever-changing mood.
If you or a loved one were sexually abused at these Illinois youth facilities or treatment centers, you may qualify for significant financial compensation from a state-established fund. More than 800 individuals have come forward with allegations of sexual abuse at these facilities, with claims spanning decades, prompting legal action and increasing public awareness. If you experienced abuse while at any of the mentioned facilities, you can now confidentially report the incident and check for potential compensation. Don't wait, as time to file your claim may be limited. Click the Learn More button now.
Treating those who were injured and getting them to the hospital to receive further treatment, and also beginning the process of trying to piece together what is actually happening in the field. We got a new update that the state is trying to increase their workforce.
They come like music from hollowness, like mushrooms from damp. Daily and nightly they alternate within us, but we cannot tell whence they spring. Can we then hope in a moment to lay our finger upon their very cause? But for these emotions, I should not be, but for me they would have no scope. So far we can go, but we do not know what it is that brings them into play. 'Twould seem to be a soul, but the clue to its existence is wanting. That such a power operates is credible enough, though we cannot see its form. It has functions without form. Take the human body with all its manifold divisions. Which part of it does a man love best? Does he not cherish all equally, or has he a preference? Do not all equally serve him? And do these servitors then govern themselves, or are they subdivided into rulers and subjects? Surely there is some soul which sways them all. But whether or not we ascertain what are the functions of this soul, it matters but little to the soul itself. For coming into existence with this mortal coil of mine, with the exhaustion of this mortal coil, its mandate will also be exhausted. To be harassed by the wear and tear of life, and to pass rapidly through it without the possibility of arresting one's course. Is not this pitiful indeed? To labor without ceasing, and then, without living to enjoy the fruit, worn out to depart suddenly, one knows not whither. Is not that a just cause for grief? What advantage is there in what men call not dying? The body decomposes, and the mind goes with it. This is our real cause for sorrow. Can the world be so dull as not to see this? Or is it I alone who am dull, and others not so? There is nothing which is not objective. There is nothing which is not subjective. But it is impossible to start from the objective. Only from the subjective knowledge is it possible to proceed to objective knowledge. Hence it has been said, the objective emanates from the subjective. The subjective is consequent upon the objective. This is the alternation theory. Nevertheless, when one is born, the other dies. When one is possible, the other is impossible. When one is affirmative, the other is negative. Which being the case, the true sage rejects all distinctions of this and that. He takes his refuge in God and places himself in subjective relation with all things. And inasmuch as the subjective is also objective, and the objective also subjective, and as the contraries under each are indistinguishably blended, does it not become impossible for us to say whether subjective and objective really exist at all? When subjective and objective are both without their correlates, that is the very axis of Tao. And when that axis passes through the center at which all infinities converge, positive and negative alike blend into an infinite one. Therefore, it is that, viewed from the standpoint of Tao, a beam and a pillar are identical. So are ugliness and beauty, greatness, wickedness, perverseness, and strangeness. Separation is the same as construction. Construction is the same as destruction. Nothing is subject either to construction or to destruction, for these conditions are brought together into one. Only the truly intelligent understand this principle of the identity of all things. They do not view things as apprehended by themselves subjectively, but transfer themselves into the position of the things viewed. And viewing them thus, they are able to comprehend them, nay, to master them, and he who can master them is near. So it is that to place oneself in subjective relation with externals, without consciousness of their objectivity, this is Tao. But to wear out one's intellect in an obstinate adherence to the individuality of things, not recognizing the fact that all things are one, this is called 3 in the morning. What is 3 in the morning? Asked Tzu Yu. A keeper of monkeys, replied Tzu Chi, said with regard to their rations of chestnuts, that each monkey was to have 3 in the morning and 4 at night. But at this the monkeys were very angry, so the keeper said they might have 4 in the morning and 3 at night, with which arrangement they were all well pleased. The actual number of chestnuts remained the same, but there was an adaptation to the likes and dislikes of those concerned. Such is the principle of putting oneself into subjective relation with externals. Wherefore the true sage, while regarding contraries as identical, adapts himself to the laws of heaven. This is called following two courses at once. The knowledge of men of old had a limit. It extended back to a period when matter did not exist. That was the extreme point to which their knowledge reached. The second period was that of matter, but of matter unconditioned. The third epoch saw matter conditioned, but contraries were still unknown. When these appeared, Tao began to decline. And with the decline of Tao, individual bias arose. End of section 4. Section 5 of Musings of a Chinese Mystic, Selections from the Philosophy of Chuang-Tzu by Lionel Giles. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Illusions. How do I know that love of life is not a delusion after all? How do I know but that he who dreads to die is as a child who has lost the way and cannot find his home? The lady Li Qi was the daughter of Ai Feng. When the Duke of Qin first got her, she wept until the bosom of her dress was drenched with tears. But when she came to the royal residence and lived with the Duke and ate rich food, she repented of having wept. How then do I know but that the dead repent of having previously clung to life? Those who dream of the banquet wake to lamentation and sorrow. Those who dream of lamentation and sorrow wake to join the hunt. While they dream, they do not know that they dream. Some will even interpret the very dream they are dreaming. And only when they awake do they know it was a dream. By and by comes the great awakening, and then we find out that this life is really a great dream. Fools think they are awake now, and flatter themselves they know if they are really princes or peasants. Confucius and you are both dreams. Tomorrow a sage may arise to explain it. But that tomorrow will not be until 10,000 generations have gone by. Granting that you and I argue, if you beat me and not I you, are you necessarily right and I wrong? Or if I beat you and not you me, am I necessarily right and you wrong? Or are we both partly right and partly wrong? Or are we both wholly right or wholly wrong? You and I cannot know this, and consequently the world will be in ignorance of the truth. Who shall I employ as arbiter between us? If I employ someone who takes your view, he will side with you. How can such a one arbitrate between us? If I employ someone who takes my view, he will side with me. How can such a one arbitrate between us? And if I employ someone who either differs from or agrees with both of us, he will be equally
You were not. Pause. Like, flowing else. However,
unable to decide between us. Since then you and I and man cannot decide, must we not depend upon another? Such dependence is as though it were not dependence. We are embraced in the obliterating unity of God. Once upon a time, I, Chuang-Tzu, dreamt I was a butterfly, fluttering hither and thither, to all intents and purposes, a butterfly. I was conscious only of following my fancies as a butterfly, and was unconscious of my individuality as a man. Suddenly I awaked, and there I lay, myself again. Now, I do not know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I am a man. Between a man and a butterfly, there is necessarily a barrier. The transition is called metempsychosis. End of section 5. Section 6 of Musings of a Chinese Mystic, Selections from the Philosophy of Chuang-Tzu by Lionel Giles. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Mysterious Immanence of Tao. The penumbra said to the umbra, "At one moment you move, at another you're at rest. At one moment you sit down, at another you get up. Why this instability of purpose?" "I depend," replied the umbra, "upon something which causes me to do as I do, and that something depends in turn upon something else, which causes it to do as it does. My dependence is like that of a snake's scales, or of a cicada's wings. How can I tell why I do one thing, or why I do not do another?" Prince Hui's cook was cutting up a bullock. Every blow of his hand, every heave of his shoulders, every tread of his foot, every thrust of his knee, every whoosh of rent flesh, every chick of the chopper was in perfect harmony, rhythmical like the dance of the mulberry grove. "Sire," replied the cook, "I have always devoted myself to Tao. It is better than skill. When I first began to cut up bullocks, I saw before me simply a whole bullocks. After 3 years' practice, I saw no more whole animals, and now I work with my mind and not with my eye. When my senses bid me stop, but my mind urges me on, I fall back upon eternal principles. I follow such openings or cavities as there may be, according to the natural constitution of the animal. I do not attempt to cut through joints, still less through large bones. A good cook changes his chopper once a year because he cuts. An ordinary cook once a month because he hacks. But I have had this chopper 19 years, and although I have cut up many thousand bullocks, its edge is as if fresh from the whetstone. For at the joints there are always interstices, and the edge of a chopper being without thickness, it remains only to insert that which is without thickness into such an interstice. By these means the interstice will be enlarged, and the blade will find plenty of room. It is thus that I have kept my chopper for 19 years as though fresh from the whetstone. Nevertheless, when I come upon a hard part where the blade meets, until with a whah, the part yields like earth crumbling to the ground. Then I take out my chopper and stand up and look around and pause until with an air of triumph I wipe my chopper and put it carefully away. "Bravo!" cried the prince. "From the words of this cook, I have learned how to take care of my life." In the state of Chung, there was a wonderful magician named Chi Han. He knew all about birth and death, gain and loss, misfortune and happiness, long life and short life, predicting events to a day with supernatural accuracy. The people of Chung used to flee at his approach, but Liu Tzu went to see him and became so infatuated that on his return he said to Hu Tzu, "I used to look long upon your Tao as perfect. Now I know something more perfect still." "So far," replied Hu Tzu, "I've only taught you the ornamentals, not the essentials of Tao. Yet you think you know all about it. Without coxing your poultry yourself, bring your friend with you and let me show myself to him." So next day, Liu Tzu went with Chi Han to see Hu Tzu. And when they came out, Chi Han said, "Alas, your teacher is doomed. He cannot live. I hardly give him 10 days. I'm astonished at him. He is but wet ashes." Liu Tzu went in and wept bitterly and told Hu Tzu, latter said, I showed myself to him just now as the earth shows us its outward form, motionless and still, while production is all the time going on. I merely prevented him from seeing my pent-up energy within. Bring him again. Next day, the interview took place as before, but as they were leaving, Chi-Han said to Liu Tzu, It is lucky for your teacher that he met me. He is better. He will recover. I saw he had recuperative power. Liu Tzu went in and told Hu Tzu, whereupon the latter replied, I showed myself to him just now as heaven shows itself in all its dispassionate grandeur, letting a little energy run out of my heels. He was thus able to detect that I had some. Bring him here again. Next day, a third interview took place, and as they were leaving, Chi-Han said to Liu Tzu, Your teacher is never one day like another. I can tell nothing from his physiognomy. Get him to be regular, and I will then examine him again. This being repeated to Hu Tzu as before, the latter said, I showed myself to him just now in a state of harmonious equilibrium. Where the whale disports itself is the abyss. Where water is at rest. Next day, the two went once more to see Hu Tzu, but Chi-Han was unable to stand still, and in his confusion turned and fled. Pursue him! Cried Hu Tzu, whereupon Liu Tzu ran after him, but could not overtake him. So he returned and told Hu Tzu that the fugitive had disappeared. I showed myself to him just now, said Hu Tzu, as Tao appeared before time was. I was to him as a great blank, existing of itself. He knew not who I was. His face fell, he became confused, and so he fled. Upon this, Liu Tzu stood convinced that he had not yet acquired any real knowledge, and at once set to work in earnest, passing 3 years without leaving the house. He helped his wife to cook the family dinner and fed his pigs just like human beings. He discarded the artificial and reverted to the natural. He became merely a shape. Amidst confusion, he was unconfounded, and so he continued to the end. Books are what the world values as representing Tao, but books are only words, and the valuable part of words is the thought therein contained. That thought has a certain bias which cannot be conveyed in words, yet the world values words as being the essence of books. But though the world values them, they are not of value, as that sense in which the world values them is not the sense in which they are valuable. Duke Wan was one day reading in his hall when a wheelwright, who was working below, flung down his hammer and chisel, and mounting the steps said, What words may your highness be studying? I am studying the words of the sages, replied the Duke. Are the sages alive? Asked the wheelwright. No, answered the Duke. They are dead. Then the words your highness is studying, rejoined the wheelwright, are only the dregs of the ancients. What do you mean, sirrah? Cried the Duke, by interfering with what I read. Explain yourself, or you shall die. Let me take an illustration, said the wheelwright, from my own trade. In making a wheel, if you work too slowly, you can't make it firm. If you work too fast, the spokes won't fit in. You must go neither too slowly nor too fast. There must be coordination of mind and hand. Words cannot explain what it is, but there is some mysterious art herein. I cannot teach it to my son, nor can he learn it from me. Consequently, though 70 years of age, I am still making wheels in my old age. If the ancients, together with what they could not impart, are dead and gone, then what your highness is studying must be the dregs. A drunken man who falls out of a cart, though he may suffer, does not die. His bones are the same as other people's, but he meets his accident in a different way. His spirit is in a condition of security. He is not conscious of riding in the cart, neither is he conscious of falling out of it. Ideas of life, death, fear, etc. cannot penetrate his breast, and so he does not suffer from contact with objective existences. And if such security is to be got from wine, how much more is it to be got from God? It is in God that the sage seeks his refuge, and so he is free from harm. Liu Yu Ko instructed Po-hun Wu-zhan in archery. Drawing the bow to its full, he placed a cup of water on his elbow and began to let fly. Hardly was one arrow out of sight ere another was on the string, the archer standing all the time like a statue. "But this is shooting under ordinary conditions," cried Po-hun Wu-zhan. "It is not shooting under extraordinary conditions. Now I will ascend a high mountain with you and stand on the edge of a precipice 1,000 feet in height and see how you can shoot then." Thereupon Wu-zhan went with Liu Tzu up a high mountain and stood on the edge of a precipice 1,000 feet in height, approaching it backwards until 1/5 of his feet overhung the chasm, when he beckoned Liu Tzu to come on. But the latter had fallen prostrate on the ground with the sweat pouring down to his heels. "The perfect man," said Wu-zhan, "soars up to the blue sky or dives down to the yellow springs or flies to some extreme point of the compass without change of countenance. But you are terrified, and your eyes are dazed. Your internal economy is defective." A disciple said to Lu Chu, "Master, I have attained to your Tao. I can do without fire in winter. I can make ice in summer." "You merely avail yourself of latent heat and latent cold," replied Lu Chu. "That is not what I call Tao. I will demonstrate to you what my Tao is." Thereupon he tuned 2 lutes and placed one in the hall and the other in the adjoining room. And when he struck the kong note on one, the kong note on the other sounded. When he struck the chio note on one, the chio note on the other sounded. This because they were both tuned to the same pitch. But if he changed the interval of one string so that it no longer kept its place in the octave, and then struck it, the result was that all the 25 strings jangled together. There was sound as before, but the influence of the keynote was gone. End of section 6. Section 7 of Musings of a Chinese Mystic, selections from the Philosophy of Zhuangzi by Lionel Giles. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Hidden Spring. Tao has its laws and its evidences. It is devoid both of action and of form. It may be transmitted, but cannot be received. It may be obtained, but cannot be seen. Before heaven and earth were, Tao was. It has existed without change from all time. Spiritual beings drew their spirituality therefrom, while the universe became what we can see it now. To Tao, the zenith is not high, nor the nadir low. No point in time is long ago, nor by lapse of ages has it grown old. Si Wei obtained Tao, and so set the universe in order. Fu Ci obtained it, and was able to establish external principles. The Great Bear obtained it, and has never erred from its course. The sun and moon obtained it, and have never ceased to revolve. Chuang's time, and dost not account it charity. Thou who art older than antiquity, and dost not account it age. Thou who supportest the universe, shaping the many forms therein, and dost not account it skill. This is the happiness of God. Life follows upon death. Death is the beginning of life. Who knows when the end is reached? The life of man results from convergence of the vital fluid. Its convergence is life. Its dispersion, death. If then life and death are but consecutive states, what need have I to complain? Therefore, all things are one. What we love is animation. What we hate is corruption. But corruption in its turn becomes animation, and animation once more becomes corruption. The universe is very beautiful, yet it says nothing. The 4 seasons abide by a fixed law, yet they are not heard. All creation is based upon absolute principles, yet nothing speaks. And the true sage, taking this stand upon the beauty of the universe, pierces the principles of created things. Hence the saying that the perfect man does nothing. The true sage performs nothing beyond gazing at the universe. For man's intellect, however keen, face to face with the countless evolutions of things, their death and birth, their squareness and roundness, can never reach the root. There creation is, and there it has ever been. The 6 cardinal points reaching into infinity are ever included in Tao. An autumn spikelet in all its minuteness must carry Tao within itself. There is nothing on earth which does not rise and fall, but it never perishes altogether. The yin and the yang and the 4 seasons keep to their proper order, apparently destroyed, yet really existing, the material gone, the immaterial left. Such is the law of creation, which passeth all understanding. This is called the root, whence a glimpse may be obtained of God. A man's knowledge is limited, but it is upon what he does not know that he depends to extend his knowledge to the apprehension of God. Knowledge of the Great One, of the great negative, of the great nomenclature, of the great uniformity, of the great space, of the great truth, of the great law. This is perfection. The Great One is omnipresent. The great negative is omnipotent. The great nomenclature is all-inclusive. The great uniformity is all-assimilative. The great space is all-receptive. The great truth is all-exacting. The great law is all-binding. The ultimate end is God. He is manifested in the laws of nature. He is the hidden spring. At the beginning he was. This, however, is inexplicable. It is unknowable. But from the unknowable, we reach the known. Investigation must not be limited, nor must it be unlimited. In this undefinedness, there is an actuality. Time does not change it. It cannot suffer diminution. May we not then call it our great guide? Why not bring our doubting hearts to investigation thereof? And then, using certainty to dispel doubt, revert to a state without doubt, in which doubt is doubly dead. Qi Chan, said Shao Qi, taught chance. Jia Tzu taught predestination. In the speculations of these 2 schools, on which side did right lie? The cock crows, replied Tai Kung Tiao. And the dog barks. So much we know, but the wisest of us could not say why one crows and the other barks, nor guess why they crow or bark at all. Let me explain. The infinitely small is inappreciable. The infinitely great is immeasurable. Chance and predestination must refer to the conditioned. Consequently, both are wrong. Predestination involves a real existence. Chance implies an absolute absence of any principle. To have a name and the embodiment thereof, this is to have a material existence. To have no name and no embodiment, of this one can speak and think, but the more one speaks, the farther off one gets. The unborn creature cannot be kept from life. The dead cannot be tracked. From birth to death is but a span, yet the secret cannot be known. Chance and predestination are but a priori solutions. When I seek for a beginning, I find only time infinite. When I look forward to an end, I see only time infinite. Infinity of time past and to come implies no beginning and is in accordance with the laws of material existences. Predestination and chance give us a beginning, but one which is compatible only with the existence of matter. Tao cannot be existent. If it were existent, it could not be non-existent. The very name of Tao is only adopted for convenience's sake. predestination and chance are limited to material existences, how can they bear upon the infinite? Were language adequate, it would take but a day fully to set forth Tao. Not being adequate, it takes that time to explain material existences. Tao is something beyond material existences. It cannot be conveyed either by words or by silence. In that state which is neither speech nor silence, its transcendental nature may be apprehended. All things spring from germs. Under many diverse forms, these things are ever being reproduced, round and round like a wheel, no part of which is more the starting point than any other. This is called heavenly equilibrium, and he who holds the scales is God. Life has its functions, but in death, we are all made equal. That death should have an origin, but that life should have no origin. Can this be so? What determines its presence in one place, its absence in another? Heaven has its fixed order. Earth has yielded up its secrets to man. But where to seek whence am I? Not knowing the hereafter, how can we deny the operation of destiny? Not knowing what preceded birth, how can we assert the operation of destiny? When things turn out as they ought, who shall say that the agency is not supernatural? When things turn out otherwise, who shall say that it is? End of section 7. Section 8 of Musings of a Chinese Mystic, selections from the Philosophy of Chuang-Tzu by Lionel Giles. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Non-interference with nature. Horses have hooves to carry them over frost and snow, hair to protect them from wind and cold. They eat grass and drink water and fling up their heels over the champaign. Such is the real nature of horses. Palatial dwellings are of no use to them. One day, Polo appeared, saying, "I understand the management of horses, so